What is going on, everybody? It's your favorite, bestest, everest podcast host, Sean Cudahy of the Room 9 podcast, introducing to you episode 28. And I am recording this in my car right now, believe it or not. I wanted to get it done before I head into this amazing part-time job that I'm doing. And I say amazing very sarcastically, but it's doing what I need to do right now, providing a little extra finances to keep pushing this Room 9 message out. You guys would also like to help push the Room 9 message out. room9podcast.com/support. And you can give us a one-time donation, sign up for Patreon, give us a monthly donation, whichever you prefer. And that would just help further the message that we are trying to put out there to everybody about substance use disorder and how the importance of education is for family members and just people in general, and getting this message out because this is something that is not slowing down. Thank you to everybody who is already supporting Room 9, whether it's financially, whether it's just help spreading a message, sharing Facebook posts, sharing episodes, whatever it may be. You guys are all greatly appreciated. Even those little messages of encouragement that get sent to me are amazing, so I greatly appreciate it. In episode 28 coming up here, I sit down with the Vice President of Horizon Village, Brandy Vandermark-Murray. We have a great conversation, as always. The people who are working at Horizon Health are just incredibly passionate about what they are doing and passionate about helping everybody that is dealing with this epidemic of addiction. Hope you guys very much will enjoy this episode. It was an awesome conversation with Brandy, and make sure that you show your support for them over at Horizon Health as well. So without further ado, episode 28, Brandy Vandermark-Murray. Later.
Wait a minute. You're Sean Cudahy. That's right. How you gonna know? You're Sean Cudahy. Stop asking fucking questions. That's right. Yeah. You better believe it. Oh, you better believe it. That's right.
Yeah, good. We're good.
Okay.
So, yeah, like I said, Brandy,
Come on.
like just keep it chill.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's what I'm all about. I like having that very just conversation like we're out having coffee, which we are in your office pretty much.
We are from Monday morning on a rainy day.
And the weather is ridiculous in May. I've been tired. I heard something on the radio the other day that April, so I think there's 30 days in April, and 18 of them were rainy, and then 8 out of the other 12 were under 40 degrees.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so that was the month of April, which I'm about done with it.
Yeah, for sure.
I am definitely done with it. So you are the vice president at Horizon Health.
Horizon Village.
Horizon Village, you
Yeah.
are. Okay. What parts do you have with Terrace House then?
Sure. So Horizon Village is actually a third of Horizon Health. So if you kind of
Okay.
think of the company as like administrative health services, and then Horizon Village, which is all things residential. So it's detox services, stabilization services, and then all those services out on the campus where you work, Sean. So it's the women's program, the veterans program, the young adult program, and the traditional program. And so I oversee all of that piece from a clinical and operational perspective. And then I just help with special projects in the company from different opportunities that we take on.
So when you say special projects, as far as like outside of Horizon? Or
No, within Horizon.
Within Horizon? Okay.
But we're a fairly big team, and so there's always new opportunities. And so while my title is part of Horizon Village, if a new opportunity came to the organization, I definitely have the opportunity to be a part of that. Women's initiatives, we did the open access project. So whatever essentially I can help with, I'll try.
Yeah, I think it might have been on the Horizon page that you've you've done a lot of work with women in domestic violence, correct?
Correct. It's where my foundation was. I wouldn't say it's necessarily like my specialty because most of the population we treat, 70%, is men. But it is an area that like I'm an advocate for. It's partially how I got involved in the career. It's something that, the women's program, Aurora Village, that opened this past year. I'm very mindful of the specialty areas of that population, the advocacy we need to do. So I oversee the women's treatment program at Horizons, and that's a group of managers who are just really thinking new initiatives, like how do we keep bringing services for women, because we want to engage them more in the treatment process.
Yeah, that was a huge, because I was there at the end at Horizon Village. So my last week or so, all the women were out completely, finally. And that was a huge talk of the town.
Yeah, it's always a weird transition. Every time we open up a program, I've been through openings of various programs and we've moved patients. Some people are so excited, right? And other people, the community that they've bonded relationships with, there's a little bit of resistance sometimes. Aurora's been open since October, so you must have been there around that time.
Yeah, I left in the middle of October.
And it's really settled. We don't have that resistance of trying to be in the co-ed facility anymore. They really have bonded, come together, and we're seeing some really great results.
Yeah, there was some difficulties there. I know all the guys naturally, which I thought that was hysterical to me, going in and seeing like groups of guys flock to certain. I thought the dudes would be worse off because I felt like testosterone would start kicking in and all the male egos would start coming out more. But I thought for the women I feel like they'd be more comfortable to share personal things when it's all women.
Absolutely.
And feel more understood and everything else.
Yeah.
And that was always my argument because everybody's like, it's going to be worse. Nobody wants that. And that was like, I don't know. I mean, I would feel, as much as I can put myself in the shoes of a woman, I would be more comfortable sharing personal things, especially when it comes to violence and, sexual things, that it would be more comfortable with the same sex around.
Yeah. And we wanted to reduce distractions in general. We know that some people do well in co-ed programs, but the reality is it can feel very much like even like a college, right? Where there's just all these distractions. And part of recovery is removing those distractions initially and focusing on yourself. And so, we tried to kind of redirect a lot of people, but it always settles. Like I said, after 30 to 60 days, when we move people around on the campus, things always settle.
It settles down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. That was funny. Have you seen was there like a spike in, I don't want to say violence so silly, but confrontation at Horizon with all the guys?
No, actually not at all.
No?
And,
okay.
Part of it is being prepared for change. Our staff have to acknowledge that it's difficult for the patients. It doesn't matter if it's a small change or like a big change like that. So a lot of it was dialogue, conversation, but also having leaders and the residents step up and really, for an example, kind of say, like, there's some great things we can do now. Like we, for example, put a workout room back in Horizon Village. Little things like that, where it's like, we also are putting more energy and attention on your needs when we have these specialty populations. And people in communities, when you have really strong advocates for recovery, the patients can really be resourceful to help us. And so, no more than back when we were a co-ed program, every once in a while someone is in the community where they just struggle living with other people, or they struggle with their own, behavioral issues, and we have to sometimes make decisions that they can't stay there if violence is going to be something they're going to engage in. But no, I was really happy. It was actually pretty smooth.
It was a smooth transition. That's good. Yeah, I was wondering how it was going.
Yeah, no, it's going well. In the women's program, everyone's like, oh my God, women's programs, they're going to be screaming at each other. They're going to be catty. You have a little bit of that, but you also work through that. We're teaching them that you can't approach relationships like that. And as a result, we actually have a lot of people waiting to get into Aurora because they want to be in a women's program. That need is absolutely there in the community.
Yeah, I feel like that's always kind of been that the women have kind of gotten almost the short end of the stick when it comes to addiction and recovery and substance use.
Part of the short end of the stick is the challenges for women to come into treatment. And so, there's always a challenge for everyone. It's a big life decision. We have a lot of shame and guilt, and I say that because as a society we have that, but with women in particular, if you are going into a program and 7 out of the 10 are men, there's also that kind of barrier. There's the barrier that we have a lot of females who are still, single households. And so childcare is a barrier. And a lot of them hide it really well. Women tend to hide addiction a little bit more than men for various reasons. They may not be the ones going out there and getting substances. They're at home using. They tend to, depression, anxiety, all that kind of stuff comes out, and people dismiss it sometimes in women, where with men, sometimes you see more violence or more like just overt behavioral issues coming. And so they get more attention with that. That's changed, I think, a little bit in the past 5 years. Not a lot, but it's changed because mostly the opiate epidemic. We have more younger women using those substances hand in hand with their male peers. And so our demographics are changing. Now it's about 6 to 4, if you kind of think about that. But it does change all the time. Sometimes I am trying to get women in, and sometimes, I don't have a long wait list with women, but with women in particular, we also know that when they hide it well, but when they're using, they tend to kind of rapidly go through it pretty quickly as well, just like with any of the other opiate users that we're seeing. Yeah,
mine was pretty quick. I think I started with the pills, and it was not even a year and a half before I was full blown out, and my life was pretty much in shambles.
Absolutely. And that's the path of opiate use. I have very few patients that come in and have not fallen down that path quickly. I have a lot of patients who have stayed out using for years and years and years, but we're seeing more and more within probably 6 to 12 months, people's lives really in shambles.
Are in ruins. And I think it's awesome that there's so much starting to happen in especially this community for addiction, and especially for opiate addiction.
Yeah. We talk about education, in general, and the importance of just talking about it. And I think about, I've been with Horizon for 13 years as a clinician. I was starting, and my first patient who was really addicted to opiates was probably 2006. So if you think about that, that's over 10 years ago. But at the time, people didn't really talk about it as much. It definitely wasn't as prevalent of a discussion, even at like the family dinner table, talking about people know. Now, everywhere I go, anywhere I go, if someone finds out what I do, they talk to me about, thank you for helping our community, or they have someone they're trying to get into treatment, right? Or they know someone. So, just talking about it opens up the door to have conversations about the risk factors.
It is. It's amazing what language can do sometimes when you say things out loud.
Yeah.
Because that is the trouble. Because you said 2006, you started as a counselor, correct?
I did.
Substance use counselor?
Yeah. In 2006, I came to Horizons and was working as a substance use counselor at the Boulevard, actually, one of the bigger locations. And I actually started mostly working with adolescents, and not any particular reason other than there was a need at the time. I thought it as an opportunity to engage a population that was really challenging. So for the first few years, that's kind of what I did, was women and children actually over there.
Yeah, that's huge too. I did a podcast with Friends of Recovery. They're based out of Rochester. And it's not Kids Escaping Drugs, it's Buffalo. What is the name of the damn organization that is out there? Oh my gosh, I'm having a brain fart. But she works with teens. She got clean actually in high school, and she works with all these teens, and the importance of like hitting a community early on is, huge. I think when I look for positive things for my addiction, which there are a lot that I've turned him into anyway, one of the biggest things is my girlfriend. I've been with her for 5 years, and her son is 17 and her daughter is 15. And I think that's one of the biggest things that they were woken up to through all of this was, they're like, this is real, this is around, this can happen. And I'm praying that, that they've learned, that they've seen something and will totally, hopefully learn from my mistakes, because that's, it's even something I've shared with my own 12-year-old.
Yeah.
I haven't talked much about it with my 6-year-old, but my son, I've, not into great detail, but told them, I was gone this past summer because, I was struggling with this and I needed to work on myself so I could be here for the rest of your life and be a good father. And I think that's important to really hit teens at a young age.
Yeah, absolutely. Prevention is part of our approach to, helping people recover. But having those conversations with children, they know more than we think.
Absolutely.
Especially when you think of a 12-year-old. And we don't have to be so specific, but we just have to acknowledge that they're maybe feeling things, they're upset, they're scared. And so having those conversations, and a lot of times young adults, when they come in, when I was doing the program at the Boulevard, it was marijuana, it was alcohol, it was a lot of behavioral type stuff. It wasn't necessarily harder drugs at that time. It did happen. People, were starting to dabble in, and they eventually got into some hard drugs. But those conversations just about acknowledging that, like, it's okay to talk about your feelings were the ones that we really focused on, and that just having community and having people around you, that your peers you could talk to, as a positive influence. But yeah, it's definitely younger and younger people are coming in as part of the family system. Our family program, at the campus, we have young people who come in all the time to visit their loved ones, and we have to acknowledge that they have to have some understanding of what's going on.
Which, that's what you guys do in an awesome family program out there. And Ann told me you guys are building a facility.
We are, yeah. We're building a family training center / kind of recovery center, because we, over the years, have grown the campus. As you know, it started with a 50 bed, and now it's over 125 beds. That's 125 individuals who are bringing family members and loved ones in. And so our old style of, just using space that we had is not necessarily conducive to the needs that we have. And that could be smaller family sessions, or it could be big, presentations we give. It could be those programs where, the families come out in the summer and they just have a huge picnic, and we have 150 people on the campus that we want to make sure that they have space they're comfortable in, that they understand that it's not, we're putting them in a room, it's a dark place. We want people to come out and celebrate their loved one's recovery with them.
Yeah, my family was extremely, my mom and sister, my mom was out there every Tuesday, every Saturday.
Good.
She would make it out there. My sister was out at least once a week, and they just have taken full advantage of it. My father, not so much, but he has his own battles he's dealing with.
Yeah.
But they've loved it, and that's such an important thing. One of my main things that I love doing with this podcast is doing them with family members and getting it out there. I did a episode with a couple they volunteer at Save the Michaels. Their son died of an overdose, and it's just, and they just say, everybody says, you educate yourself. If you love somebody who's struggling with it, it is so important to educate yourself on how to handle it, how to deal with it. Because, that makes, I think, the world of difference. My family's support, but yet towards the end of everything, my mom and parents having those boundaries, but still loving and supportive completely is what has helped me get through and get to the point where I'm at so quickly. Is that love and support around me, along with, but you can't do this. If you do this, we start back over here, and just having those strict rules, but just educating themselves.
Yeah.
Because my mom was clueless, really, to everything when it came down to it, how to do it and how to even set boundaries or whatever it is. So I think that's awesome. You guys have a wonderful family program going, and that's really awesome to have a whole separate building for it.
Yeah. We want, part of, as we expand too, is we have to do more. And it's not just with families sometimes it's even with providing education to people in the community, who aren't impacted yet, who just want to kind of have education. So the Family Recovery Center or Training Center, I don't really know exactly what we're going to call it, will also be a place where we can bring community members in and open their eyes and understanding of the services that we have.
That's great. I wanted to talk to you about, because it just popped in my head when we were talking about the women going to rehab and how there's kind of not been enough resources for them. Have you guys ever put in, I did a podcast with a woman, she's from Chicago, and she's been clean for about 10 years, but she had a kid and went into rehab where her kid also can go with them. Have you guys ever thought about, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Obviously that's a very vague question, because I know there's so many things that go into, and responsibilities and everything else. But
there are programs, Sean, and locally there are programs that have those services. It's a specific type of service, right? Because you are then providing daycare services, and you're providing different parenting services and things like that. So, I can say we have not committed to doing something like that, but we do partner with people in the community, such as Lighthouse or Madonna House, to make sure if that is something that the patients really want to work on, they have those services available. So a lot of the females that come in specifically to Aurora Village, while many of them are parents, a lot of them actually want the time to themselves, and not selfishly. And they still, want to be with their children, and they still love their children, but they're just not well enough to be in the parenting role. And so we also want to make sure we have the programs that are really going to help stabilize and rehabilitate those individuals so they can be better parents when they leave. So in the program that we run, we do incorporate things such as parenting classes, classes, such as, education classes, things that are going to help them with the foundation, but not all of them are ready or even sometimes have the legal rights to have their children yet. And so we have to offer both of those services in the community. And so we do offer the other services with our partners, and we encourage people all the time just to tell us what the barriers are so we can work through them. But we're not doing this alone. Horizons isn't everything to everyone. We just want to make sure the things we do really well in quality work.
Yeah, I don't know why that popped in my head. I was just thinking, because I feel like that's that's something I've experienced with, just talking with other people throughout my whole stay. Was I noticed very quickly people were always, all right, I got to get back to work and pay these bills. My kids are there and doing this, and I got to get back to this job or I'm going to lose it. And I observed this very quickly, in my stay, because this was my whole first go around, first time being arrested, first time in rehabs and everything. So this has been my first go around, and I observed very quickly, I noticed people were just rushing to get out. And anytime I remember making that commitment to myself, anytime that feeling came up of I'm missing out on something, I need to get and I would slow myself down and be take this time to do what you need to do now so that you don't come back.
Yeah.
That you don't become a part of this cycle that I see so many people in that they can't get out of it.
Yeah, we have a lot of patients where that language comes up a lot. A job opportunity comes up. I think about the summertime, right? When we have things come up like construction or seasonal employment. And, when I was a direct clinician and even as, a supervisor or a program director or whatever it may be, we used to have those conversations a lot about play it out. Temporarily you might be missing out, but what happens in 6 months, 12 months, when you don't have a good foundation, you miss out on more, or you sometimes don't have the opportunity to even come back and work on yourself. And, I don't want to minimize, the decision to come in, but not many people get an opportunity to truly work on themselves for a few months and truly just spend some time looking inward and thinking about what they need to do. And so look at it as an opportunity and for a lot of people, a blessing, because not everyone gets an opportunity to even come in the doors. And I don't say that because of wait lists, but some people either with all the barriers I just talked about, or some people don't even make it to come into rehab.
Yeah, it's insane how many people are dying.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. I found that I learned to very much, I had my moments, but really enjoy the time that I had to really work on myself. Even up to the point where, I started doing this podcast and everything, because I think it's important, you become very complacent, especially when you're out of rehab.
Yeah.
And you can become very bored. And I think that's a huge thing that leads up to people using is just when they're out and not working and you're collecting some money for social services and your rent's paid for and you're in an Oxford house and you don't got to worry about nothing. I see that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
But that's something I've really have learned is, all right, I'm going to enjoy my downtime and love that. But I found stuff to keep me busy. But going back to work now, like I told you before we hit record, I'm like, oh, this regular job stuff, this is insane. I can't do this for much longer.
Well, we have people, and we say, try to just find something you're passionate about, but also be okay with being bored a little bit. You have to be able to sit with that boredom and sit with that downtime. I know you probably did the DBT and stuff like that, but really making sure that people acknowledge that that's also part of your life. And that's a healthy part of having balance. We can't have you entertained and we can't have you activated all the time. And you need time to learn that. And that's why when we talk about length of stay, just because someone maybe understands addiction or looks healthier, 6 weeks in, it's really not a lot because you're revamping your whole lifestyle.
We look at that. 6 months, even 6 weeks, 6 months. I feel I'm going over 13 months now, and I still have to, I think it's something you always have to be aware of when you're dealing with substance use is that just little pull sometimes of just a little knock on the door. I feel like addiction is always there, just kind of waiting for you to let your guard down. Yeah. And I noticed it was another thing. I become obsessed with things, like certain thoughts. That's why I fell in love with philosophy. What is truth, or do we have free will or not? These are things when I become obsessed with something, I intend to just put everything. I'm researching, listening to different people's points of view. And one of the things I became obsessed with very quickly is why are people relapsing so much? I don't understand this. What are they not figuring out, or what is not happening that they just keep going back to this? Because they know, it ruins your life. I know if I go back and start using and even take some pills, even if my mind convinces me, oh, just you can control it now. Like, I know before I swallow that pill that this is very much, well, a very big possibility I'm going to back up at square one.
Yeah.
Like, people know that. So what is it that is driving that allows them to ignore that and go use? And I've just been obsessed with it, trying to figure it out, trying to pull it in. And not that there's really any one answer for it, but I knew, like, right away, I've seen people would get confident after a certain time. They'd get overconfident. And I came up with a quote that to this day I say to myself every day. It's like, I know I got this as long as I know I don't got this.
Yeah.
As long as I'm continuously working on my recovery, which has been one of the biggest things for this podcast, is it's helped me. This is the number one person. They constantly, every time I make a social media post or try to network or edit or do a podcast with somebody, my recovery is right there with me. Like, it's reminding me of where I've came from and all the hell I had to go through to get to where I'm at. And I think that's such a huge thing with people, is they lose touch of it.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line.
We talk a lot about, willpower and, what that means for some people, because some people really believe that even when they're here. And so, we kind of go back to the basics of, smart recovery versus strong recovery. You can white knuckle it. You can do all these things and just rely on willpower. But what if you can try all these things to really help you put a preventive in place? If you had a loved one where, there was a risk factor of them having a heart attack, would you just say, well, I'm just going to willpower it? No, you would have a change in a diet. You would ask them to exercise. You would try to get those things around them to be preventive. Nothing is guaranteed. I teach a class at Canisius in their graduate department, and a lot of the students that I work with, some of them have personal experiences with opiate addiction as far as loved ones, but a lot of them, this is kind of their first opportunity to have some really open conversations about opiate addiction. And we put it in the curriculum because of anywhere you go into counseling, you can come into contact with someone who is going to be impacted by this. Addiction in general, but we just specifically were talking about opiates. And a lot of my students, we had this really open dialogue around, relapse as part of the process and, concept of choice. And it was really eye-opening for me that even people who have been in the field or are working in the field, are sometimes struggling with that concept still. And so we all kind of came to a place of like, a lot of that heeds warning. It doesn't mean that it is just going to happen. It just means that, to your point, we want our patients to be mindful of the risk so they can live a quality life. We don't want to scare them. We don't want them to not enjoy life and always be fearful of relapse. But we want them to know, you can build a really great foundation and keep working this recovery. But just be mindful that one time, yes, it could take it completely back to where it was. And I've seen it happen so many times. I've seen people go out and be beautiful and amazing when they're leaving treatment, right? And they're in their best self. And sometimes shortly after, sometimes a week later, they're back. And we kind of look at, well, what happened? And oftentimes is, I didn't do what I knew I should do. I didn't reach out. I got cocky, whatever it may be. And so part of our treatment is, so how are we going to remember that when you leave again? Like, what are we going to work on that's going to be different, and keep encouraging people and giving people hope, because it is really scary. And we've lost a lot of patients where they've done very, very well. And that one time, like I said, led them to a place where they couldn't come back and ask for help.
Yeah, I've had a couple people when I was at Horizon Village leave while I was there and end up being back there before I left. Yeah. And it is. I think it's something that, each time you're there, because I kind of just come down, there's obviously a lack of self-awareness somewhere, I believe. Along the line, you didn't see something and weren't able to grab a hold of it that time around, and then you're going to come back and try to work on more and then find out what it is. But I think whether or not, because I know there's still that debate about whether addiction is a disease or not, I think whether you believe that or not, I think looking at it and treating it like a disease is the best possible route.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you said it yourself, you're not going to, if you treat it like somebody has cancer or has heart problems and you treat it like that, there's so much more better results that come from that.
And it helps remove for the family that stigma and shame, because it helps them understand a little bit more, like that not people often will say, like, what did I do to help my family member or have my family member use? And, while we know there's social aspects of why people use substances, it helps you understand that, like, people don't just stop because they love you more, or people don't use because they love you less. Like, helping people understand the brain chemistry piece, while, I don't get stuck in the science, it helps them understand this is a really difficult, we're reconditioning the brain. And that helps family members just understand the work that has to be put in.
Yeah, I mean, that's not easy to do with anything, whether it's drugs, whether it's any other habit that you have. It's something when your brain is, so used to doing something, you can do it without even thinking about it. It's insane how difficult it can be to break that and become more aware of it. Yeah. I remember, I'm trying to think the way I walked. I remember trying to straighten my feet out. I noticed that I kind of walked like pigeon-toed, I think that's what they call it. And I wanted to start, all right, I want to walk normally. It took me forever to be able to keep my feet straight as I walk. Yep. So it's just, difficult to do that with anything, especially when it comes to addiction. Well,
and you at that time, Sean, that's obviously a small example, but you also didn't have chemicals in your brain challenging you to not do it, right? So you kind of have to think about that piece. And with young adults, I think a lot of times they think, oh, my brain will just heal, it's still developing, or maybe they just don't even think 5 years ahead. But we have to explain to them really, really directly that the damage that you're doing is going to take a long time to heal, if it heals. And so that part of the education helps people understand that they have control of what they can do with their health. And this is a health crisis. This isn't just a mental health crisis.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, that's it's huge because, like I said, I'm over 13 months clean, and I still see there's certain things that trigger that I'm very aware of. Like if I'm in maybe a certain spot, or I go to a certain concert or wherever it is, that I specifically remember always, even if it's just having some beers. There's that feeling that you can get sometimes when you're just in a certain area. Yeah. There's so many different aspects of what can cause and trigger different, behaviors as far as going back into relapse. And it is, to really just to educate people and try to get them to become aware of them. Is the biggest thing. I think one of the things I've seen too, which is an issue, is people, when they're in these places, don't want to put that effort in a lot of times. Yeah. And I've seen that become a big issue, as if, son of a bitch. I cannot believe I forgot to turn that off.
Sorry.
I've seen that as a huge issue, that people just didn't want to put any effort in. And that was probably another one of my 5 big observations when I first started getting into rehab, that I knew I had to, put everything into it that I could.
Well, we do have patients sometimes, I think, who are maybe not ready. And I hate using that term sometimes, because people can get opportunities to get ready anytime in the treatment process. Yeah. And so part of our job is to kind of figure out, from a person-centered perspective, how do we engage people to want to put some effort into it? Because not everyone comes in completely yes, I want to change my life, I'm good. There's a lot of variables that happen. But what I can say is, as far as residential, what I enjoy about residential the most is seeing peers help people stay motivated, but also when they see someone else working on something and seeing that their life is getting better, the opportunity for them to go, I can probably do that too. And so the power of community is really strong. I've worked in outpatient, I've worked in detox, I've worked in inpatient, residential, all those programs. But that is one of the things that I think we offer from a residential perspective, is that power of community. I've seen so many times, even in the detox unit, where someone comes in, doesn't want to stay, they're scared, lots of things are happening for them emotionally and physically, and someone is sitting at their bedside telling them, their story and, what motivated them, or just encouraging them. And then you see them form relationships that can be very supportive through the process. And so I know there's a lot of things we talked about, about relapse and struggles and all that, but there's a lot of really amazing things that happen when you come into a community like that.
Yeah, I still very close with 2 guys. I was at her. We both came in within, all 3 of us came within 3 days of each other, and I'm still very close and connected with those people. There's probably 3 or 4 other people that I stay in contact with. So you form these awesome relationships when you're there. I think it's an awesome thing, which kind of leads me to another thought about, as far as just having that connection with, everybody needs to feel that connection. And I think that's a huge reason for even just use in general, is because people feel this lack of connection in their lives and this lack of love. And I think that's huge as a community, even outside of rehabs, but just in your general area. I think that's a big great starting point as far as trying to end this whole crisis and everything else, is working in communities and having more outreach and more things like that. I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of, when you go and see different national lectures or different conversations or even other podcasts, that is something you'll start to see a little bit more is, addiction isolates, right? Addiction creates isolation, it creates loneliness, it creates shame, it creates all these negative things that happen. And so, a lot of people recently have said that the opposite of addiction is connection, right? And connection not just to people, but to yourself, to really kind of connect with yourself and say, like, I deserve recovery. I deserve to be a valued person. And those might sound kind of like these positive affirmations that people say, but truly believing those. And then when people leave programs, having them feel connected to their families or connected to education programs or connected to just peer groups, like all that. But outside of addiction, we have created these things where people isolate all the time by themselves, whether it be through technology or whether it be through differences. And so they don't reach out to you because you're different than me. So we're trying to emphasize to people that even if you have depression or even if you are anxious about things, it's really important to find connections at every level, because when you are struggling at your worst state, reaching out and asking for help is going to be essentially what's going to help you, and a lot of people are like, well, I'm not sure if I can do that. Well, you have to practice it. You have to practice it when you're doing well. Because if you practice it for the first time when you're about to pick up, it's too late. It's just too late. But connection, we talk about it a lot. And, we want people to realize that it takes a lot of work, but it's so meaningful. People get that because they feel alone when they walk through these doors.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a big thing. And saying those, those positive affirmations, I found out while I was in jail, one of the things I realized is I need to learn how I talk to myself. Like, I need to stop, even if I spill over a cup of water and saying, Sean, you're an idiot. Like, I need to stop that completely, because I realized very quickly that when you say things over and over again, your ego will attach to that and start believing it, no matter what it is, whether it's negative or positive. So what I really started doing while I was in jail was catch myself, even if it was 20 minutes into negative self-pity, crappy talk about myself. You're worthless. You're an idiot. You're a scumbag. Look at this shit you stole from your girlfriend's kids. Look at your crappy father, your crappy son. You're a failure. And then I would stop and I would start talking to myself. But you deserve forgiveness. You deserve acceptance. You deserve to be loved. Look at these beautiful traits you have. Look at your, where your motives are and where your heart truly is. And eventually I just was, all of a sudden I started developing this confidence in myself and this self-love and this self-acceptance. And yeah, I did some really messed up things, but this is what I'm turning it into, and I'm causing it to be a beautiful thing. And I'm all of a sudden giving these crappy things that I've done, all of a sudden I see meaning in them and purpose, and it's become a beautiful thing. And that's something I've tried to really, just share with everybody that I come in touch with, especially in addiction. But it even goes outside of addiction, just people in general, that you can better your entire life, your whole point of view. I mean, you have a paradigm shift completely. And all of a sudden you're looking at life in this incredible way, and the cup is half full. Yeah. And I think that's a super important thing to really start, pushing on people and trying to get them to just be like, you deserve love. You really do. And you need to realize that for yourself. And I remember my girlfriend said to me, she was like, she wrote me a letter, gave it to me before I went to my first rehab out from jail. And, she just said, I believe in you. I have faith that you can do amazing things in this world. But if you don't believe that for yourself, my belief and faith isn't worth nothing. And it's one of the things I'm trying to hammer along with, Room 9 when I do these podcasts. And as I get into recovery coaching and stuff, is to really push that onto people is, you have to develop self-worth, or else you'll sit in self-pity, and self-pity just blocks everything good. Yeah.
And we have our, the patients practice it. So that negative self-talk that you were talking, like, say it out loud, but then challenge it out loud. Like, don't just keep it internal, because you have to practice it. And it doesn't mean you have to believe it, right? Like, it doesn't mean that just because you are challenging it, you believe it in that moment. But eventually you do. And eventually you kind of start challenging yourself to stop saying things like that. And we use the phrase sometimes in therapy, we'll talk about, how would you talk to your, 10-year-old self or 5-year-old self? Would you use that language? Probably not. And so you're like essentially learning how to parent yourself a little differently. And a lot of people get emotional when we talk about that, because they realize that they're not allowing themselves to be vulnerable. They're not allowing themselves to have a little bit of humility and be able to acknowledge that the decisions that they made don't define them. And that takes time to work through that shame. And that's critical to the work that we do.
Yeah, shame's a big one.
It is.
Guilt and shame. Yeah, those are my two big things. You know, when I say this my first time around, technically I got clean on my own for a month. And that was the biggest thing, is I stopped using. And that was it. That's all I did. And then, I didn't want to talk about anything. I was like, let's just put all this stuff underneath the carpet. We'll put that over there and we'll go on with our lives and act like nothing happened. And obviously that didn't work. You know, it was within 30 days I was back using again because of that, like, guilt and shame of, you know, one is I carried a lot of guilt and shame from my divorce and felt like I failed as a father, you know, to my children. And I also carried it for the crazy messed up things I was doing when I was using. And not dealing with those and not talking about those things was, I mean, huge.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest things I've had to learn to really just, and that goes hand in hand with the self-talk and talking to yourself, in a loving way. And it makes it easier to talk about these screwed up things that I've done, because we've all done messed up things. We've all screwed up and have done hurtful things to people. And that's important. I think that's super important to develop that. And it is crazy when you say something out loud, how different it is.
Yeah.
I picked up from my mother that I hold full-fledged conversations out loud. So,
Well, and the reason why we talk about saying it out loud, sometimes even like in group, is because other people might be thinking the same thing, and you empower other people to kind of go, that's not just me. And then they might have conversations with each other, right, about how that formed. Like, and usually it's not even internal dialogue. It's that someone else told you that, or someone else reinforced it. And so you start having these more meaningful conversations about what you can do in practicing things. When we have people who are holding a lot of shame, a lot of times that shame is so inward that they end up just hurting themselves more and more. And so we talk about, like, if you work through that shame a little bit, you're going to be kinder to yourself, gentler with yourself, but you're also going to invite people to come and help you just by, helping yourself. But it takes a ton of work, and it's a lifetime, really, because something can happen and flood of shame can come all over again. And that's where we really want to make sure that people are remaining hopeful even in those moments, and in 5 years from now, if there's a moment of shame, it doesn't have to completely take you down. It could just be a moment where you're experiencing an emotion that's completely healthy and you know how to manage it.
Yep, that is definitely one of the biggest things I've seen. I think Brene Brown does an awesome
she does. Brene does
work on shame and obviously vulnerability.
Yep.
I think that's one of the things I tell people all the time, that she was the cause of my divorce, and people look at me, what? And I remember I seen her first TED Talks on vulnerability when it first came out, and that was probably 8 years ago?
Yeah.
Probably 7 or 8 years ago. And it just totally changed, especially my point of view as being a man, and how, I've been taught this, even shown, not necessarily like somebody's verbally said to me, you can't, express these feelings, but it's all over in society. And I started doing that with my wife, and she was like, no, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
But it's a huge thing. Yeah. Well, just having the courage to be vulnerable. I was working I've been in kitchens my whole life, and I remember saying to somebody, I talked about crying or something, and how I just discovered, like, it's the same thing as that deep laughter, like the same release anyway. When you're done, you feel lighter, you feel better, like there's just something about it that's so beautiful. And he said something like, you a little girl or something, and I remember thinking, like, it took me so much more courage, so much more bravery, so much more strength to be able to be open and vulnerable. It took so much, and you just see that in people all over.
Yeah.
That there's such a lack of that, and it does. Anybody who can, like I shared with you, the guy who did the podcast with me yesterday, and how just fragile he was. But I told him, I was like, dude, you are just, this is incredible how strong you are. I don't think you even realize how strong you are for even be able to talk about these, horrendous things that have happened to you in your life.
Yeah. Well, vulnerability, we talk a lot about it, not even just with the patients, but with our staff. It's not just about expressing difficult emotions. It's about expressing true emotions. And when you're vulnerable, you're also open, right? You're open to hearing people. You're open to feedback. You're open to opportunity. And so you have to kind of look at it from different angles, because a lot of times people equate it with sadness, like kind of how you did.
Yeah.
And we kind of talk about, well, sad is part of the process, but we want you to be vulnerable for a lot of other reasons.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to manage that vulnerability in a healthy way, because you can't be so vulnerable that you end up becoming, having an unhealthy level of influence.
Mm-hmm.
So it's balance.
Balance, the B word.
Yeah.
That's what I had everybody at Horizon Village, because that really is the key to everything in life is balance. And I had even the counselors at Horizon Village saying the B word.
Yeah.
We'd all call it the B word. I'm going to use the B word here. And I mean, I think Carl Jung, he's probably one of my favorites. And I've, read so much of what I can understand of his stuff anyway. But he is a constant preacher of having balance among everything. Yeah. Whether it's, it's the yin and yang, just having that perfect amount of balance of energy, female energy, male energy, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And apply. And it's a constant thing you have to do your whole life. Yeah. I mean, if you want to be balanced in anything, it's a constant awareness of it. I mean, my biggest thing is not doing the podcast all the time or stuff for Room 9. Like, I have to take time to myself. Mm-hmm. Sit down. It's okay to watch TV and, turn your brain off every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's definitely a huge thing. So what are we coming up on? 50 minutes. Holy crap, this time flies when we do this. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. You kind of... I mean, not that there's a set time. I usually keep it in this time, but what are your final kind of thoughts of the realm of addiction, what you see, what needs to be done, your advice, whether it's for parents or...
Yeah, sure. I feel like it's kind of been intertwined through the whole conversation, unintentionally, but with probably some intention too. I'm very fortunate in my job because I get to have over 190 people every day come into services and get help in residential. And so what I think I can say, and probably very similar to some of the people you've spoke with, is that, recovery is possible. And I know that that's a simple statement, but I think a lot of times when people are contemplating, family members and loved ones trying to come in, they're not sure if it's possible. And so I think just putting yourself around people who have gone through the journey or gone through, whether it be, treatment or not, or even support systems, hearing how people are able to put their lives back together and do a really, really amazing things. One of the things about social media that I love, there's things I don't love about it, but there's things I love about it, is I get to see sometimes like our patients do these really amazing things. And even you, Sean, seeing these amazing things. And whether you just kind of stumble upon it on a Facebook feed or a LinkedIn, you get to see people like really going out there and making some difference. And I think that I want people to really understand that that's the other part that we don't talk about enough. We talk about, overdoses, we talk about death, we talk about crime, we talk about all that. But I really want people to embrace that other half and empower that other half and encourage that other half, because I think with doing that, we're going to open up the doors for the people who are maybe not ready yet or have that shame and looking at that, and then with addiction, it's not going away. While the substances change, while we might have another epidemic come down the road, addiction's not going away.
It's been here for a long time, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
So I think we have to just really be open about, as a community, like, how do we contribute to all this, and how do we take active roles in trying to change that with the prevention and all that? Because while I'm blessed to be helping people that are, needing treatment, I would love someday to not have that need and just be on the front end having conversations before people, engage in life-changing decisions and helping them stay on the right path. And so those are things that I think are really important to understand and keep the communication open with everyone. And I think that's really it. I could talk about it for hours and hours, but it's my passion too. It's what I love to do. And when I say passion, I just love working with people. There could be people here who had all different types of behavioral disorders, and everyone's story is so unique and so resilient. So you talk about the person you interviewed yesterday, the amazing resiliency that we see. It's just mind-blowing.
It is, and I think you had a huge point. Like, we need to focus on more of that than so much of the negative things, because it's encouraging when you hear, I have people message me all the time randomly, like, about a certain episode where they hear somebody's story, and it's just totally like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one going through this, and I can do this. This is possible. If this person went through this, I can definitely do it too. And I think that's a huge and awesome message to keep pushing. And as always, Anne surrounds herself with an amazing team of people, and it was awesome sitting down with you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And a huge fan of Horizon Village. I often say, like, I need to get them to sponsor me as much as I'm talking them up, or at least people think they're giving me money for as much as I talk them up. But you guys do have an awesome program. Yeah, I even told Anne when I did the podcast with her that I was trying to think of a negative experience that from the counselor or team, and there's none I can really think of. I felt like nobody was there, I should say, to collect a paycheck. I feel like everybody that was working there just wanted to help.
Yeah. Well, and that's the people we work with is what makes our jobs often manageable, right? I mean, we have really challenging days, and Anne's probably said on her podcast too, that is the other part of the job I love the most. You know, it's the people that are in the hallways and the people that are helping those patients on the front line. Yeah, and while it feels like you're sponsoring us, the reality is that there's a lot of programs that are doing great things. And
absolutely, there is, yeah.
And you had the opportunity to come through a program that, we work really hard, but you worked really hard. And that's why you are able to kind of tell your story.
Absolutely.
And talk about the benefits because you're experiencing the benefits.
Yeah, I said that when I was doing the podcast the other day, was you can be in the crappiest rehab or the most expensive one. It's really what you put into it, you'll get out.
Yeah.
And as long as, a facility provides opportunities for people to get as much out of it as they want, then you can get that. So I think that's awesome. And thank you for your time. I know you are busy.
Yes, I am, but I could always make time, but thank you very much.
I enjoyed doing this very much. So,
yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, if you want to help us out, go to room9podcast.com/support, and you will find a letter to the donor. And I encourage you to read that before you do anything on that page. And also get to our contact page and fill out a form. I'd like to stay in touch with you guys and send you out personal emails when it is possible to do so. And just let you know that I'm here as well. And I try not to be too absent in my responding, especially this early of a stage. I like to try to stay in touch with everybody. So make sure you fill out a contact form. That'd be awesome. Facebook page. We got a Room 9 Podcast Facebook group you could check out. We are also on Twitter at Room 9, so be sure to check that out. Instagram at Room 9. YouTube, Room 9 Podcast. Make sure you get on. Support us. Let us know you're out there. Greatly appreciate it. I am almost a certified recovery coach. Just have to put my hours in and take a test. My classes are all done, and that is something in the future I plan on offering as a resource for Room 9 is recovery coaching, and want to start doing speaking engagements. So there's a vision that I have, and it's coming together. And I'm glad you guys are with me for this ride. All right, much love. Thank you for your support and your encouragement and your love. And I hope you guys are doing awesome. And I look forward to talking with you next week, Monday. Later.
Wait a minute. You're Sean Cudahy. That's right. How you gonna know? You're Sean Cudahy. Stop asking fucking questions. That's right. Yeah. You better believe it. Oh, you better believe it. That's right. Come on. You're Sean Cudahy. That's right. That's right. Oh, you better believe it. Wait a minute. You're showing Cudahy. Wait a minute. You're showing Cudahy.